My name is John Dwyer. And I believe that the government and the institutions try really hard to take the fun out of being successful. But it doesn't have to be that way. I'm living proof, and so are the people that I work with. Day after day, I continue to see successful people make simple financial mistakes with their money. Mistakes that are unknowingly costing them hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars over their lifetime.
If you would like to experience epic upside,
then these videos are for you.
This morning, we're going to talk about rates of return, right?
Yeah.
Am I going to need more coffee in my mug?
Does this not excite you? Does these topics not excite you?
Not really.
No.
But that's okay. I'm sure you'll make it exciting.
I'm going to do my best.
All right. So could you define for myself and for the rest of us who aren't as financially aware, what is rate of return? Can you define that for us?
So rate of return is really just either a net gain or loss in an investment over a time period. All right. But the reality is that it's not so much the rate of return on our money that matters. It's what we can spend. And what I mean by that is that there is really two different types of rates of return that we have to really factor into it. Okay. And the first type of rate of return is one that pretty much everybody is familiar with, is that's average rate of return.
I've heard that.
Okay. And in my opinion, what's challenging is that average rate of return really doesn't mean anything. See, that's a mathematical equation, right? But when we look at investments and we look at how our money is compounding and growing, what we have to really look at is what I refer to as the actual rate of return, because there's a big difference between the two. In reality, the actual rate of return is the most important factor that you need to look at when you're looking at either your portfolio modeling, your investments, or what they're earning. Okay, so again, the rate of return is a net gain or loss of an investment over a time period, but in traditional planning, they always talk in terms of average, right?
Yep.
And so, what does that even mean?
I don't know. Can you tell me?
So let's
That's why I'm here.
So let's walk through a little exercise,
okay?
Because it can be really misleading, right? So let's walk through a little exercise. So Maria, I'm going to guarantee you an average rate of return of 20% over 2 years.
Okay.
Now, would you think that's a good rate of return or a bad rate of return?
I would say that's a good.
Okay. Now, are you led to believe that you're going to have more money or less money at the end of the 2 years if you average a 20% rate of return?
I am led to believe that I'll have more.
You're led to believe that you're going to have more, right? Okay, so I'm going to walk you through this mathematical equation, all right? So even if you're not great at math, I'll help you with the math.
I am great at math.
Oh, you're good at math? Okay, great. So here's the deal, okay? So the first year, right? Oh, and just for our viewers out there, I'm not suggesting or even recommending that we're going to get you a 20% rate of return. This is just a hypothetical example, okay? But in the investment amount is just going to be $100. Okay. So you invest with me $100, and the first year I knock it out of the park and I get you a 100% rate of return.
Okay.
So at the end of the year, your $100, we had a 100% rate of return. What is the value of the account now after the end of the first year? $200. Okay. So now the next year starts. We start out with $200, and we have a oopsie, right? A correction in the market, and we lose 60%.
Okay.
Okay, so if I had $200,
that never happens.
That never happens, right? Okay, so if you have started out with $200 and we have a negative 60% loss, okay, that's a $120 loss off the 200. So if I take 200, subtract out 120, what's my account value at the end of the 2 years?
At the end of 2 years, it's $80.
$80. Okay, but how do we calculate averages? Well, what you have to do is you have to add up the positive years and subtract out the negative years and divide by the number of years. So we had a 100% rate of return in year one, and then we had a negative 60% in year two, right? So if I take up the 100 and subtract out the 60, I'm left with what?
If you take 100 and you subtract 60?
Yep. 40.
Yeah.
And I divide that by 2, what's my average rate of return? 20%. See, I averaged you a 20% rate of return over 2 years.
True.
Now, the real question is, do you have more money or less money?
I have less money.
Than what you started with,
less,
right?
Yep.
But did I fulfill my obligation to you?
You did.
I did.
Yeah.
Right? I guaranteed you an average rate of return of over 2 years of 20%.
So what I hear you saying is that the average rate of return is somewhat misleading. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, the reality is the average rate of return is really irrelevant.
Right.
It's what the actual return is. What is your actual return? And what happens is when we're dealing with people in the financial industry, traditional planning is allowed to tell people if you just average 8%, you're going to have all this money. But see, the average is really irrelevant. I averaged you and got you a 20% rate of return, and you end up with less money.
Yes.
See, money is not math or wealth. Okay? Money or math is the equation of the 2 years added up and divided out, and you get your average. Right? Wealth is strategies. Wealth is how money really works. Math is linear. Money's not linear. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, and we have to really look at the effect of the actual returns. In fact, if you took all the years of the market, doesn't matter what it is, and you look at the averages, the actual will always be less. And so when we look at clients' portfolios, I could care less what the average rate of return is. I only care about what their actual return is, because that's what matters.
That makes sense. Well, and back to your example that you used earlier in our conversation, that doesn't take into account any of the, I'm probably going to say this wrong because I don't know your lingo, but distribution fees or taxes.
Yeah, so that's a great point, right? So when you look at that example, right, I wasn't even taking into consideration advisory fees or taxes.
That's what I was trying to say.
Those numbers would be a lot worse.
Right. So you'd end up with a lot less than 80.
Right, because I was using a 20% net of fees and taxes in that example, so the average rate of return would have to be higher to compensate for that. And see, what's really interesting is that I was reading an article in the newspaper the other day, and the financial.
Do we get the newspaper?
Did you what?
Do we get the newspaper?
No, I throw that one away.
Okay.
So, but I was reading the article, and they were talking about their financial gurus were saying if you just do the math, right? If you just do the math and average 8%, you're going to have all this money in retirement. But see, as I started working in this industry and I was doing what everybody else was doing from a planning perspective, what I started to realize is that traditional planning is broken because guess what? If it was a science, people would just average 8% and have all this money and be able to retire at the same standard of living that they had during their working career.
But that never pans out that way.
Never pans out that way. Why? Is because the average rate of return is completely different than the actual rate of return.
And that's a concept that most are unaware of.
Most people are unaware of because, again, in our industry, we're allowed to talk in terms of this is what you averaged.
Sure.
As
Very
if
misleading.
As if it means anything.
Right.
And then what happens is that you have to look at all the distribution models and all these different things, and it really throws off what people really actually have and what you can spend.
Right.
I mean, I guaranteed you a 20% average rate of return, and you ended up with less.
Right. You gave me that 20% rate of return, but it didn't really matter because I ended up with less money.
Ended up with less money.
Right.
Again, so the actual return will always be lower.
So my question is, if the average rate of return is somewhat of a misleading concept and pretty much irrelevant, is what you're saying, how do you at Solid Rock Financial, how do you go about educating people like the truth? How do you get them to understand?
Great question. So we just help them understand how wealth really works. Okay. And by peeling back the layers of the onion and helping them understand the economic truths. If what you thought turned out not to be true, when would you want to know about it?
No, the sooner the better.
Sooner the better, right? And so, at Solid Rock Financial Group, we just educate people around how wealth truly, really works. And we help to peel back the layers of the onion and help them really understand the differences between average and actual rate of return because it can have a huge impact.
I'm getting that, yeah.
Right?
I'm learning.
And so when we just work with our clients, we just partner with them and just help them educate. I never recommend or tell a client what to do. I give them and provide them with the accurate information, and then they allow themselves to start to think for themselves and to say, okay, is this not making sense?
Right.
I mean, one other thing that's really interesting is that when people start to look at their average rate of return, they they look at their balances of the portfolios, they don't even calculate the contributions that they've made into the account. So that can offset the actual balance because they never ask anybody that's been funding a 401k or putting money in any other type of investment. You ask them how much money they put into the account over the 20 years. Do you think they know the answer to that?
No.
They have no idea.
Yeah.
So all they're doing is looking at their statements and buying into that, well, I've averaged 8%, I'm going to get this.
Right.
And that's not how wealth works. Maria, it's like playing Monopoly or playing a game. Right? We have the game, we have the rules.
I like games.
You like games, right?
Yeah.
And so all we do is put the pieces of the puzzle on the game board and use the game board to navigate the strategies. And our industry, in my opinion, is terrible at just trying to show or throw a product or talking about a rate of return or a product that's going to solve the problem. You know, I don't think there's really any bad financial products out there, but does it align with the game board or the strategy of what you're trying to accomplish and do?
Right, is that strategy working for you or against you?
For or against you, right? And the reality is true wealth creation is all about strategy, right? The products will align and kind of raise their hand and determine, you know, is this a good fit for what the overall strategy is? And see, if you think about it from this perspective, you know, as we save our money and our wealth, we have these eroding factors that put pressure against what we're trying to achieve.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we have inflation, we have taxes, we have market volatility, we have planned obsolescence.
I don't know what that means.
So planned obsolescence, right?
Dumb it down,
No,
Dwyer.
so planned obsolescence, okay, is things are built nowadays to wear out, right? And so, I mean, think about the washer and the dryer. I mean, they're basically built now. They'll tell you have about 10,000 loads. I mean, that's probably a high number, but X amount of loads before you have to basically replace it.
Right.
So it's going to require more money. We have technological change. I mean, there's something that probably hasn't even been invented yet that you and I are going to want, and so it's going to take money to do that. So we have all these eroding factors that are coming against us as we try to save and accumulate our wealth. And the average rate of return is trying to climb up, go against that, right? But here's the other question that we have to think about. As I'm saving and accumulating my wealth, and I have these eroding factors against me, the inflation, the planned obsolescence, technological change, taxes, fees, all these things. When I get to the top or when I get to my retirement years, do those things go away?
No.
No. So on the way up of what I refer to as climbing Mount Everest, which I believe we're going to do a segment on here in another time period, but when you're climbing up, right, to get up to the financial peak of what your retirement looks like for you, right, and we have these eroding factors, when we get to the top and we start to when we start to spend our money, those factors no longer go against us, they accelerate our descent. And so that's what happens, is that we're, you know, with a lot of American people, they're running out of money before they run out of life, and that's a problem.
Because the same factors that were working against you as you were ascending the mountain
now are accelerating the descent and rapidly having an increase on the ability for you to spend your money.
Can you be more specific?
Maria, that's a great question. And you know, we're going to actually cut a video on that and have an entire segment on that as well, because there's a lot to be said about the whole distribution and accumulation mentality. And so we're going to shoot a video on that. So if it's okay, we'll kind of bypass that for now, and we'll dig into that in our next video that we record. So
I get to do more of these with you?
if you want.